Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's Kachi once again. I'm really excited to be sharing my little knowledge in JavaScript with you guys. So before we go straight to it, I want to give out a big shout out to my tutor, my trainer, Mr. Indifreke. He has been doing a good work on me. That's why I can share this knowledge with you guys. He's a great guy. So shout out to him. So before we go to our Visual Studio, you would need Visual Studio. Yeah, last time I did I did something on function. I realized that most people could not follow up because the whole work environment was strange. So you will need Visual Studio for writing our code. So we need Visual Studio code and Node. So go to this link, code.visualstudio.code/download, and download Visual Studio Code based on the kind of system you're using. If you're using Windows, you can download for Windows. If you're using Mac, you can download for Mac. Then you can also go to nodejs.org, rather, this link here, and download Node. It will help you to print out our code so you can see it in real time. So Node is very important. So once you're done downloading them, you can install them, then open them. If you're having issues with the installation, just go to YouTube and search how to install VS Code on Node, and you'll see a very good tutorials you can use to actually learn how to install your VS Code and Node. So when you are done installing them, you can now open them. So guys, as you can see, I'm currently in my Visual Studio Code. My Visual Studio Code, and today we'll be discussing on variables. So what are variables? Variables are containers or label for storing our values. So when you're coding, you'll be writing so many things and you want to store them in a particular place where you can reference them later on without having any issue. So variables helps you do that. So there are various ways for declaring a variable. We have var, we have let, we have const. So var, let, and const. So these are the three major ways for writing or declaring a variable, or for storing a value in JavaScript. So we can say something like, let's say var username equals to Cosmos doc. So we are storing this username here in this variable called username. So whenever we print our username, it will always reference this text here, Cosmos doc. So let me show you that. Our console.log username. So our console.log username, and write node index, and it gives you what? Cosmos doc. So this Cosmos doc is stored in this username. This value is stored in this username. So whenever you console.log this username, it gives you what? This value. It references this value. So another way is by using the word let. So if I change this to let username equals to Cosmos doc. If you console.log, it still gives you Cosmos doc. So next one is using const. If I say const username equals to Cosmos doc, if you console.log username, it still gives you what? Cosmos doc. So those are the three major ways for storing values with variables. So you can declare the variable using let, var, or const. So you might ask, what's the difference between the three of them? Now the major difference is that var is not currently in use because var is obsolete. So var is obsolete. Now the reason var is obsolete is because of the issue of scoping. So var, you can declare a username with var. For instance, you can say var username is equals to Cosmos doc, and that var will be accessible everywhere. And that could be an issue because there might be some places where you would want to to assign username to another name. I don't know if you get my point. So you might want to assign username to something else. So it will have some kind of clashing and mix up. There will be a lot of mix up. So it is recommended that you use what? Let username equals to cosmos.doc, or you use const. Var is obsolete basically, so you can get rid of it basically. So we use let and const. So const is short form for constant. If you declare a variable with a constant, const username, you cannot you cannot change username to something else. Basically, you can't, because it will give an error. The red underline means there's an error somewhere. You cannot redeclare block scope variable username, so you cannot declare it again. But if this was a let username equals to cosmos.doc, you can actually come here and say username equals to JHS. I don't know what that means, but let's just use it. If you do know that index, it gives you what? JHS. So that's just it. So unlike const would always give you an issue if you try to redeclare. So you know what? Let's just try to redeclare this username with const. Let's see. So if I say const username, so it's giving us an error. So let's say we remove this const and say username equals to catchy. So if you go to terminal and not index, it will give you assignment to constant variable. And the reason it's throwing an error is because we have already declared username as cosmos.doc, so we cannot come and change it to catchy here. So it has to be let. We have to use let username equals to, and username equals to cosmos.doc, then username equals to catchy. So it's just, it just flows in line. So in summary, you only use const when you want your variable to be constant. You don't want to reassign it to something else later on in your code. If you know you would actually redeclare the variable, that same variable, you didn't have to use let. So that is the summary. So the next thing we'll be discussing here is scope. What's scope? Scope is a rule that defines where variables can be accessed or referenced. So let's say we declare a variable now with let username equals to cosmos.doc. So as you can see, we already declared it earlier on. So let's username equals to cosmos.doc. So now username is now cosmos.doc. This is a global, this is a scope. This is scope globally, in the sense that you can access it wherever in this line of code. Now this line is line 944, so you can imagine that you can have as many lines of code as possible. So once we declare a variable outside a block, I'll explain the block later on, outside a block of code, it means that that variable is a global, it's scope globally. You can access it wherever in that code, in that project. So you can access this username wherever. So now, what's a block? A block is the code found inside a set of curly braces. Blocks helps us to group one or more statements together and serve as an important structural marker for our code. Now let me get this out of here to explain this block. Let's say I write a function. Let username declaration equals to a function. Now this, whatever line of code I write within these two curly braces here, you can look at it, it's similar to this ones that we have here. is similar. Whatever lines of code I have within this particular area is a block of code. So whatever code I write here within these curly braces, they are basically a block of code. So that's basically what the block of code means. So I can write code here, write something here, write something here. Whatever is found within this here is basically a block of code. Have that in at the back of your head. It will come in handy when we start doing some crazy stuff. So what's a global scope? So you can imagine this, whatever it's, let me copy this here. So this is so let me write username, so it will help us. Let username equals to catching. So this is within a block of code. This let username is within a block of code. It's within a block of code. So now this, whatever is written outside this block of code, is what? A global scope. So this let username, this first one here, is globally scoped, while this second one here is locally scoped to this function. So now whatever code is found within these two lines of curly braces here is locally scoped to this function, whereas if you click declare anything outside these two functions, is globally scoped. So this first username here is globally scoped, while this second one here is locally scoped. It will come in handy. So block scope, when a variable is defined inside a block, it is only accessible to the code within the curly braces. We say that variable has block scope because it's only accessible within that block of code. So now this is basically what that's explaining. Let me copy this out here and paste it here so that I won't have to be writing it out ever and so much. So now this is it. When a variable is defined inside a block, it is only accessible within that scope. So if I comment this out, if I say this is defined locally scoped, that we already agreed that this is locally scoped to this function. If I come outside of these two curly braces to print out console.log username, what do you think will happen? It will give us an error. Why? Because it's not defined. It is locally scoped, and I'm checking for it outside the local configuration where it is defined, where it was defined. So let username equals to catchy. It is defined within these curly braces. So I'm now going outside these curly braces within outside the environment where I defined it to call it, and it gave me an error because what? I didn't call it within the scope. So whatever you define within this has to be called within. So if I comment this out and console.log username, it gives us Cosmos dot, because why? It is globally scoped and I'm calling it globally. So that's just it. So if you define a variable locally, be rest and assured that one thing, you have to call it out locally. So now we have this let username equals to Cosmos doc, and we now declare a variable, a function called username declaration. If we console.log username, it will give us what? This username, because what? It is globally scoped. But if we console.log username, you console.log username, and now we call this variable, we call this function. We are calling this function now. What do you think will happen? It will give us catchy. Why? Because we are calling this function and everything within this function, including this username, which is locally scoped or locally defined, will also appear in our terminal. So that is it basically. Once you declare a variable, have two things in mind. One, am I using let, am I using const? If I know I want to be reassigning this variable later on, use let. If I want this variable to be constant, use const. Once you also declare a variable, know that a variable that is declared outside a curly braces, outside this block of code, or a block of code, is globally scoped, while a variable that is declared within a curly braces is locally scoped. It's basically that simple. So you cannot access a variable that is locally scoped outside the function, and you cannot access a variable that is, but you can access a variable that is globally scoped within a locally scoped variable function, meaning that you can access this username. I can console.log this username, and it will give me cosmos.doc. So this username is accessible everywhere because it's globally scoped. It's accessible here, accessible also in this place. But if it is locally defined, it is only accessible within the curly braces. So that's just it. In my next video, I will be explaining what operators are in JavaScript. So watch out for that video. Thank you, and see you guys.